like honey, sweet to taste on burning lips. Warm and live beneath the water, feeling icy fingertips. Soothing nectar to my body, wash the image from my eyes. Dirty streets of hungry people, drink the water, dry your eyes. Let's not look at the reflections, listen to the music made. Drinking water's ease the mind, thoughts of you begin to fade.
Get yourself together before it's too late.
You know, I feel like a soldier from World War I in the trenches, just waiting for the troops to come back to help me. And they've arrived. Welcome everybody to Divided We Stand. It is Saturday, April the 22nd, 2023. And it's a pleasure to see everybody here. Hello. We'll go through all the names in a bit. But thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you're new to this channel or to our group page on Facebook, Divided We Stand, please consider becoming a member or subscribing. It would be appreciated. We are not a monetized channel. We're just in it to be. We commiserate with one another. We know it's a serious situation out there, politically, environmentally, just about everything. So anyway, it's good to see everybody. And tonight, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome back. I wouldn't want to say welcome, but welcome back our good friend, Dave Price. David.
Hey, everyone. Nice to be back. Glad to see that Brian's music still is not that good. So some things never change, man.
Well, you know, I don't want to get a copyright strike. We get a few anyway from this, but it helps. It helped the flow in your absence. So, Dave, it is such a pleasure. And you know, I probably wouldn't say this 10 months ago, but after 10 months of not seeing you here, because you are the team, you are part of us. It is really a pleasure having you here, and I've said that, you know, one day you're going to be back, and you know it's finally happened, and you know there's just so many things I want to ask you, but again, you know, I speak for everybody. We welcome you back.
Well, thank you, and again, thanks to anyone out there who sent me a message. And I was not ghosting you or dissing you. I was just basically unable to respond to anything. In fact, if I remember correctly, last show that I did was the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, either the weekend before that or that weekend. I'm not really sure which it was, but that's as I recall it. So here I am, April, a year later, we're back.
We certainly are, and you certainly are. And let's just take a quick rundown of the folks who have wished you a great welcome back. Karen Rice, we've got Gary, your buddy. We got Veg from London, Ontario. Karen, hope you're feeling okay. I know you've had some things going on. Kim from Washington, the state of Washington. We've got, of course, Joey's in there. I know that. There's Joey. We've got, we mentioned Veg. And, you know, there are always a few people who are incognito, Dave. So, yeah, and Joey, as Joey knows the dates, he knows every single date and knows what day was what. He says it's been since May 21st, I think.
All right, so that would have been the Saturday before. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Joey, you know, he's uncanny with that kind of stuff. You know, I don't want to analyze it. He's able to do it. So,
right. Very cool, Joey. Very cool.
It turns out that's Kim's birthday, so there's a link there. So
Kim, happy birthday coming up, or happy belated from last year.
So Dave, just first of all, because I don't want to avoid the obvious, you've been away for 10 months, and you've you know obviously been through a lot, especially the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Care to make any comments about your surgery?
Yeah, sure. And the reason I make them is not so much to say about myself. I think we're all in this business of living together, and being in the business of living together means that you can get unhealthy and then get healthy. So I guess it was my mid-50s. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety after a year of not figuring out what I was wrong. So that was a hellacious year then. And if I got meds, I was fine. Right, I was the guy. I was on meds for the whole time I did the show, right, and that's fine. The problem becomes is for me, meds kick out. This was the third time that they kicked out, but two previous times, within a matter of a couple weeks, they'd been able to find something that would adjust, and this time they weren't. So I won't go through the whole history of it, but just kind of where I was, and then where I am today, then and then today. So. When it first hit, that Saturday after that, I got up and I couldn't do much. I couldn't do anything. I got up and I passed out and hit my head going down the wall, hit my head going fall backwards, taking the emergency room, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No concussions, no brain damage or anything. And from then on, it didn't get a whole hell of that. Was like the high point. But my day consisted basically, Bri, of at the first in that first stage, my wife Judy would force me up at noon to eat half a sandwich from bed. I'd go back to bed. She'd force me up at dinner time, 6, 7. I eat half a dinner and go back to bed. Now, when I say go back to bed, I don't mean I slept. I just stood there. I just laid there and stared at a wall, literally.
Mm.
Couldn't settle myself to read. Couldn't settle myself to watch TV. Obviously, no podcasting. I dropped all the podcasting I was doing. No, no DC trips. No other kind of trips. And that began an interesting journey of trying to find this medication that would work, and they couldn't find anything. I tried something that being adventurous, even in that period, I thought was interesting. And you might want to suggest this, guys out there, if somebody has a problem where it's medicine is not, Western medicine is not working. It's a thing called TMS, and that stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. And basically what they do is they put you in something that resembles a barber's chair and put a couple contraptions on your head, and they shoot some magnetic waves back and forth. Now, according to the statistics provided, they say about 80% get better. I was in the 20%. So once again, nothing. And it was, you start to force yourself to do things. So I could read, but I call it defensive reading. I would just get mysteries, nothing. And I would read a mystery a day, like a George Pelecanos book or a Michael Connelly book. And that's it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do anything else. Then I got into defensive TV watching finally, which was to watch, saved my life, right? Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, and then the Game Show Network for 3 and go to bed. I did start gradually, went out a couple times to DC to see a couple exhibits with Jude. And then my birthday was coming up March 26th, right? And so a number of friends down here wanted to, do something special for it because they hadn't seen me for a while. So I was just incommunicado. I wasn't talking to anybody. So actually we went out 4 different times with 4 different groups of people for dinner. I was able to survive it. I learned you can fly with your eyes closed. Tapos, Alabama and Florida during that time. And now we're so after that birthday, then the week before Easter, it was the Monday. Now, let me back up one thing to say, because this is one of the things, if you don't have depression, if you don't have anxiety, it's something you don't know. But even those of us who do, it affects us in different ways. Mine is very physical. So the best way I could describe my life from May of last year to March of this year was like having the worst flu you've ever had for that period of time. Mm. And then you have these symptoms. One day it'd be an ache, you just feel apart. Another day your nose would run. And the doctors are looking at it, they can't find anything. So that Monday, as I said, now we're up to the Monday before Easter. I get up and I felt like something up here in the chest area, but not really pain. More discomfort than pain, but something, and it wasn't unusual at that point as part of this, what was going on. But then I felt something shooting up and down my left arm. And I just remembered somewhere, Brian, I don't know, old wives' tale or somebody told me, if you have chest pain or chest area pain and something in your arm, that's not good. Mm. So I went, Jude took me to the emergency room. I went in, I had EKG. That was normal. Everything was normal. Mm. But they ran some blood work. And they came out and they said, Mr. Price, we're a little concerned about your enzymes. They're rising. So we're going to keep you overnight for observation so we can see what's going on. I said, fine. So and then Tuesday, they scheduled me for a catheter, heart catheter. And when it came out, they told me that 2 of my arteries were 100% blocked, my heart. A third was 90% and a fourth was 80%. And they could deal medicine with the 80%, but they wanted to do a triple bypass for the other 3. And I said, absolutely, absolutely. So that was then on a Wednesday. Relatively long surgery. I mean, it's open heart surgery. They literally break your sternum and open you up, go inside. And when I got out of that, after about, I guess probably 9 hours, not all surgery, but recovery, this is where the story gets strange, kids. Stay with me. I woke up, a little groggy from the drugs, but pretty much, and I was back 100% intellectually, 100% emotionally, and 100% spiritually. And the only reason I wasn't back physically, because I just undergone this major operation. I returned in toto as if my body was reversed, you know what I mean? Or that had never happened that period of time. All of a sudden I got a sense of humor back. I can do things that I hadn't done for months. And suddenly now it's there. So what I'm in now, I'll be in recovery. It's 16 to 18 weeks of building yourself back up. And I'm just so grateful that, can you say you're grateful for triple bypass? I can.
I believe it. And I'm going to say this, Dave, because as you know, the person from the outside looking in, it was just amazing, literally amazing, because we use that word so frequently and so loosely. When I heard the tenor of your voice, the way you were putting your words together, after that operation, there was no doubt in my mind that there was just something different about you, meaning different in that you were the way you were. And, being a layman, I don't know what causes what, and I don't know anybody who's at my level, but whatever it was, again, it seemed to help. And, like you say, nobody wants to have to go through a triple bypass.
Right.
But given where you were and where you are now, again, from the person from the outside looking in, I mean, it's just such wonderful news.
Well, you're saying the look from the outside in, the look from the inside in, which I had, was no better a picture. And the nice thing, I guess, was if there was, my thing was so much more physical. No depression, not like but it was this high anxiety of not wanting to do things, coupled with why would you go out if you have this horrible flu kind of thing. So it was a long while. I'll be interested as I go through this recovery, talking to the different people in the medical field. And I'm not trying to say I'm an anomaly or unique or should be the subject of medicine today, but we you do know your body, your mind, all these things work together in function. I'm a firm believer in acupuncture. I tried twice during that time to get acupuncture treatments, and I really felt so uncomfortable laying there, like not freaking out, but just like, and I will say this for the TMS, the treatment I had a longer one. It was 25 minutes, and that was a long 25 minutes. It was you do it for 36 days, Monday through Friday. Now it's not painful or it's not harmful, and certainly for the people that help, that's great. So it's not like there's no pain, no pain involved. But yeah, it's just nice to be back. We'll see where the country is now, and obviously you follow it loosely, but since we've lived in D.C., my morning routine goes many different ways. But the one thing that always kind of remained a constant was I would grab. I will, Kim. I've worked on it. Kim,
I had to put that up there.
I'll put that up there. I've worked on that, Kim. I've got you dead to rights. So what happens is, my morning starts usually with the Washington Post, which I still find America's best newspaper. New York Times is its most impressive, but Washington Post is its best, I think. And I did not read the Washington Post that whole time, other once in a while headline. Right. But what you learn is even when you're ducking everything, no Facebook, the news seeps in a little bit, right? And what I found fascinating, especially for this show, is basically when I left the show, and we were divided. And I don't know that we're more divided, but I do know we're no less divided than when I left. And we have a couple elections coming up. And that, of course, is a true barometer of where we are. So everybody, again, thanks. I will apologize once for those people who got to me and I just didn't even respond because basically I was incapable of doing it.
No, and I certainly understand.
And now, if you feel bad about that, just don't worry about it. And life goes on. And it's we all have our problems. And mine were no greater than anyone else's. But I wish I had, there was one video I wish I had from all that. When they get you up the day after surgery, they walk, you have you walk, and you can barely walk to some people can only walk to the door. I actually made it around a small portion of the quarter, but I was hunched over to where I looked like I was 4'1", because you just couldn't bring yourself up. But by the next day more, now I'm up and walking outside. So, some basic limitations: can't drive a car, cannot be around crowds because you might get bumped. Certainly can go out to lunch or dinner if you wanted to. Certainly have friends over or go over to their house. So now we just have to start this show and figure out how we're going to change the country. And the answer is we're not, but we're going to work together to, like you say, Brian, commiserate, to look at what's wrong, maybe look at it under a new light. We all look at it different ways. And so let's get into the show. Enough about me.
That sounds great, you know. But can I say this is that, you know, how this is, you know, almost like life altering. You went from that state to what you are now. It's nothing short of like when you see these people like just all of a sudden wake up and they're speaking German or something like that.
Well, no, and all that's a good analogy, Brian. I mean, it's just, you know, and a part of me, whether it's the inquisitive child or the, you know, decades-long reporter, would like an answer, but another part of me says it's not important. You know what I mean? And I don't even know if there is one. Okay, a combination of all these things. So yeah, I'm just glad to be here. Glad to be back. Glad to talk a little politics. I see, Brian, that like I said, glad to see your taste in music hasn't gotten any better. That's pretty
putting
cool.
a lot of different music on. You know,
Thanks, Common Garden.
had not had to deal with copyright strikes. Now I do get copyright strikes for a few of these, but they lay off on most of. They'll say, you know, this is, you know, you're not monetized anyway. You can't make any money, and I'm not looking for money. And I'm sure if you two could have their way, they'd just get rid of me anyway because I'm not making them any money.
Well, that's true. But to support this idea of, you know, choosing music wisely, when I was going up and during the turmoil filming at the White House and, you know, just doing different vids like that, on 3 separate occasions, I got bumped for using songs, but they were songs in the background. You know what I mean? I wasn't even playing.
Right, they pick it up.
They pick it up. So, I mean, they're aware of it, and I understand it. Look, artists make music because it's an art form. You were a musician for a long time. I was a musician for 30 plus years.
Yeah, you could say you were more of a musician than you were an educator at some point in time. You know,
well, the idea of it was, I'm just trying to think. 1966, I started and left the performance band, the last band I was in 2007, I believe. So that wasn't continuous, but I mean, off and on.
Right.
But the same thing is, I mean, musicians need. It is an art form, but they need to make money too, and of course we're always finding ways. You know, YouTube, TikTok, all these ways combining music. Some people very ignorant. Some people pass around like I don't know if you've ever heard that, Brian. They say you can use 15 seconds of any record in a sample. You know, in hip hop, not true. You can use nothing by anybody else without their permission, legally. Now, it's a question on if they would come after you or not.
Well, I'm going to take that a step further. I hadn't intended speaking about this, but I did bring this up to one of my classes because now I'm not familiar with or very familiar with Drake. Drake is a hip hop star from Canada, but popular with the kids. But I was reading this not a Russian site. It used to be a Russian press that is exiled in, I guess they're in Lithuania or Latvia, it doesn't matter. But I was reading it, and the article explained how with Chat GPI, how with AI, they were able to create a Drake song that sounded like Drake.
Right.
And it's its own song. And I brought up to the class, I said, you know, we've talked about copyrights. You know, you can't copyright a chord progression, but you certainly can copyright melodies, and you know, Dave, as well as I do, that you know, Stairway to Heaven, there was a legal case with that. That was sued because they're using parts of the melody, and some were successful, some weren't. In that case, they weren't. But at what point, you know, because at some point the technology will become that good, and you yourself have mentioned long ago, years ago, you were telling me how in your discussion with some very intelligent gentlemen about the possible ways the world could end. One of them could be from AI. And
no question.
I'm not saying that that's going to happen.
No.
But what is going to happen is we're going to have more AI, and it's going to get better.
That's a given. And I think right, an artificial. I still don't talk very well.
You can't say anything wrong tonight, Dave. Don't worry.
Artificial intelligence. It scares some people, just the idea of it. and it shouldn't be. It's like anything else. Used properly, it is fine. Okay. The concerns that I think we need to look at is oftentimes scientists, engineers, in their rush to build something better or forget the human aspect, right? And that's why I think it's up to the people who are, ahead of these companies to look at and look down the road, or even have people around them who can say, well, yeah, that's great, but this may happen. Now, certainly I don't mean we're going to go to the Terminator or anything like that, but I think there are some problems. And as this AI gets good, imagine we have fake news now. Imagine what it could be generated if it looked and sounded like somebody, which they already do have the ability to do. They're doing that a lot on the dark web now, a lot of that stuff. And I wouldn't advise anyone to go on the dark web.
Well, I wanted to go with this, Dave. It was something that actually would probably be a good question to pose to your son, who's an economist.
Right.
But I'm going to pose it to you. I'll first bring up where this discussion came about. You're familiar with Hal Sparks, and I was briefly watching one of his shows a couple of weeks ago, and he on his show he was talking about how he explained this very, very well, how technology is deflationary. And he said, look, I'm going to take an old iMac from 1984, and this machine is well over $3,000, and it doesn't have the computing power that
of your phone, right?
And he says, look at all these devices. You look at the computers that you purchased 35 years ago, they were really expensive, and now these devices can do so much more. And he was extremely upset with Mike Lindell, whom he calls Mike Pillow, correctly so, because he was saying, Lindell was saying that AI is going to kill the world, and he says he believed that Lindell's view, not that it matters, of technology was like cursing the wheel. And I kind of understood where Sparks was coming from, because I can see the idea of technology being deflationary. But as you said, it's kind of like this neutral element where it could be used. Look, if the nuclear plants have a problem, then that's it. If you drop a bomb, and that's it.
Right.
So,
and I think, Brian,
go ahead.
I think that's why it puts such an emphasis on families and schools and communities to try to make the young people in those coming out more compassionate, more empathetic, more understanding of this. And I used to do a brief lecture over the years where I would take a replica of a gun, a replica of a computer, or not a replica, an actual computer, and then the Bible, and put them down and say, these are things in and of themselves are neither good nor bad. They're how people choose to use them. Right. In fact, many times there's very few things that are neutral, right? So you know how I feel about guns, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it tonight. But however, I can understand there is a time and a place for gun use. Unfortunately, we live in that kind of world.
Right.
Let's see what we got. Let's see what Karen has to say here. AI could bring abundance, resolving climate problems and worldviews. It could make the oligarchy go away. Karen, you're absolutely right. I couldn't argue with you. And that's the interesting thing of that balance at the future, And doesn't it get a lot, Karen, with the idea, if you view something, do you view it optimistically or pessimistically, right? An optimist would look at it that way. A pessimist would look at it, oh my God, Karen's totally out of line, which she isn't. And a realist would look at it and say, maybe, well, let's wait and see. Let's monitor it. Yes, there's a chance for that. I would suggest the thing that we've watched just in the recent weeks, Elon Musk, whom I really don't have much use for. Mr. Musk has pretty much destroyed Twitter, which I kind of thought would take a lot longer than one guy, right, coming in. And Twitter is now really a non-factor almost. From it was moving. I mean, it went from MySpace.
Trump was fighting to get back on it, and now he's still doing so through social.
Brief history of social media: MySpace to Facebook, to Twitter, and then some subsidiaries, LinkedIn, depending for business, that kind of thing. Pinterest was hot for a while.
T-Bone's.
Hey,
so good.
T-Bone, good to see your name up there. So, if you look, my concern is that with AI or any of this new technology, there are so many Elon Musks in there, already, that sometimes I wonder, there's not a lot of Warren Buffetts in technology. Think about that in a moment, because of course Warren's older, etc. And Warren has a fairly decent track record. Bill Gates, I'm still out. Gates, I think, he's done his part, making billions and then helping in third world countries developing. Hey, Rachel, hello. Thanks for your message today. I'll get back. Now, not only don't I look any worse for wear, well, the world's not done with you yet. I hope it's good things that are coming, but I don't know that. Yeah, so, it'll be interesting to see, Brian, as I sit here tonight. I don't know how you feel, but you and I are going to be around in 100 years. AI will be 100 years in its advancement, whatever it is. And will there be a show like this talking about AI, number one, right, or the next thing? And that's always the thing. I'm not smart enough nor well equipped enough in science to understand the next big thing. I just don't. So we don't know what that is. How do you prepare for it? Along those same lines, we're in this economic crisis, which seems to be perpetual, right? Rich. Well, the bottom falls out. Rich don't lose anything. I didn't see the numbers, but on the Amazon firings and all these are going on. I can't imagine they're all top executives. That doesn't make sense to me. They usually keep them on, right, and let rid of other people. So, at the same token, we're seeing more and more, for convenience sake, for savings. Walmart now. I haven't been to Walmart for a while, but Target. I think they're down at our local Target here. At most, you'll see four cashiers on the floor, and everything else is self-checkout. And sometimes it's less than that. And so there's let's just say, for example, if they used to fill every register that was there's 8 people out of work just on that shift. And the question becomes, where do they go? And what do they do? And how do they survive?
And people are there. How much do they have to work compared
right,
to what they did before? Which
right,
actually brings up a point that I'd like you to comment on this. I don't know if you've
sure
heard about what's been going on, I believe, in Iowa and a few other Western states. And that is that they're having a worker shortage like none other compared to what we have, because they're obviously smaller states. And a lot of the larger businesses there, meaning, a lot of the slaughterhouses
right,
and such, are trying to amend the child labor laws and works kids who are 14, in some states, even without the approval of the parents. And they're saying, of course, that this is a good thing for the kids. And then, someone like myself, you see through this so easily that, they want to turn the clock back 100 years.
Well, I would suggest, before they get running away,
cheap labor.
Seriously read some Charles Dickens.
Right.
And seriously read Mr. Dickens, and you can go all the way through the genre. Look now. To me, that is, I assume the states you're talking about are Republican-driven. It sounds like a Republican idea. And look, even if you wanted to go back, right, you can't. All these things are the great sayings are even attributed to somebody wrong, or the Chinese proverb. And I heard this attributed to Chinese proverb. You can never, but let me get this right. You can never put your foot in the same river twice.
Okay.
So what they're saying is, put it in, pull it out, put it right back in. That river has changed.
Right.
It's the same thing with history. Did children work? Yes. Was it good? No. Learn your lesson and move on. And we don't want to do that. I would also question, it would be interesting. Obviously, as has been since the beginning of American history, a majority of your people who work in the jobs that no one else wants to do are minorities. Mm-hmm. That's correct. I wonder, behind some of those racist fucks that are out there, if that's not an idea. Well, we don't want the Mexicans to get the jobs. We don't want the Hondurans to get the jobs. We want the Somalis to get the jobs. So if we put white kids in there, at least there'll be white workers. Now, will they verbalize that? Of course not. But it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me that was part of it. You know what I mean? Well, actually, I'll say this now. I don't think anything any Republican could do today would surprise me.
Right.
On the only way
comes right out of like Upton Sinclair. I mean, this is that bad.
You've got the jungle. Well, And of course, what was interesting when Upton Sinclair and Ida Wells and the other what they call muckrakers,
Right, muckrakers.
the muckrakers were writing, and they were some great journalists. It was one of journalism's finest
Yeah.
hours. Because they would do a lot of on-site stuff and go. And actually, Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, which was about the meat packing industry and what went in there, was very instrumental in getting these laws.
Change. And this is where, like, even in Russia, where the change is usually started with the writers, not with the government. And that's why if you don't have a free press,
Well,
this is another problem.
I agree. And also, I mean, the thing about government is if you're elected, right? If you're elected, do you really want change? I'm talking about Democrats, Republicans, whomever.
Well, you don't want your position to change, that's for sure.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So do you
Right.
really want change? Whatever this election was, you got elected, right?
Right.
So do you really want to change that? I think there are some, or let me pick on someone who I think has done the country a good service, but it's done. Senator Dianne Feinstein, right? I think it's marvelous that she contributed that much, over a period of her lifetime. She missed, what was it? Something like, I don't know, 81 of the last votes. She needs to just graciously step aside. Now, why doesn't she do?
One thing if she were doing what, say, Bernie is doing, have her, a clear mind, actively participating. That'd be another thing.
Yeah, and if she were 35, it was a temporary illness or something. But this is permanent. She will not run again for re-election. But what happens is politically, so often, is the Republicans like the fact that because they're just driving it home. Democrats aren't doing their job. Nothing gets passed, which is not true, but they drive it home. They keep these feeble people on. The Democrats in California are concerned because it will open up a primary. And, everybody has their own candidate out there of wealth, whomever, that Silicon Valley has its candidate that it wants for senator. I'm sure the environmental group have its candidate that it wants. And so right now, you're just kind of in limbo. And I think it brings up an interesting point that we'll do a show on maybe one time since we're getting older. America has not even begun to come to grips with a tremendous problem, which is just the aging of the population. Baby boomers, largest generation in history, healthiest generation in history, getting to their 70s.
Right.
Right now,
Social Security.
People living, the group that's the largest percentage-wise, not numbers-wise, but living, those reaching 100 years. When I was in the hospital, interesting, I got a roommate who was really cool. He's from England, but he works over here, and he's been in high finance all his life. And he has a client he represents who is a multi-millionaire, not a billionaire. And he is 104 years old, right? Well, and he still gets around, but that's still, we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with all this. So the Feinstein is the idea. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, these people are older, right? There's a question on the floor. I think it's a legitimate question to ask. I don't know that, should Joe Biden run at the age he will be for a second term? That's a valid question.
Well, presidents have died in office. I mean, that's not a problem in itself.
No, I'm just, it is a question. It is.
Well, if you have an age limitation on the lower end, why wouldn't you have the same option at the upper end?
And but then you can make the same argument that Joe Biden is the best candidate in America, even if he's 88 years old or whatever, right?
Right, and that's the argument that we would probably make.
I would make.
It's not very entertaining having an old codger there, but if he is, I'm not saying he's an old codger, but the fact is he is just light years ahead of anything that's out of the Republican Party.
And I would suggest that people on every part of the political scale, to me, and again, this is my opinion, the biggest job the president has, and it's the one that nobody can affect other than him, is to set the tone for the country. Okay? That's his job, or her job. Hopefully someday, pretty soon, her job. And I would submit to you that Trump set one tone, Biden set another tone, Obama set, when you look, it's a tone. Sometimes the tone matches the time, right? I think that was Obama's case. America was ready. I don't know if they were ready for a black president, but they were ready for, yes, Anthony, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. But I think if you talk to all of us aging people, my cognition used to be really good, and it's dropped down to pretty good. Yeah, it's just something that happens with age. And again, you're talking about uh, there's stories down here in D.C. and I think Biden apparently has some difficulty motoring around with his legs. And you look at it, kind of
Yes,
unsteady.
he seems somewhat frail.
And I was talking to somebody this week, in fact, who works with the Secret Service, and they said like I'm making this up, but sometimes they say, okay, so normally they let him off at the West Gate, whatever, and now they drive him up to the doorstep. That's not necessarily accurate per se, but it's there. So, of course, the question always becomes who runs, and I think we're gonna have some fun and some heartbreak between now and 2024, seeing who and what runs.
Right. Now, fundamentally, what seems to be going on is what we've been talking about, Dave. You and I have been talking about for probably, I'd say, up to 4 years. It actually probably goes maybe even more than that prior to Divided We Stand. But for what it's worth, just to revisit this idea is that we saw how the demographics were changing. We've talked about this ad infinitum on Divided We Stand, and you see how the Republicans at the state levels and at the federal levels, they see that they can't win the generals. They can't win the general elections. It's just not the way it's going to go for them. So in addition to that, they have put themselves in a trap because they have a constituency which is essentially violent. And the first people that they're going to go after are their own. We've seen that with Lindsey Graham in the airport and things like that. So they see the change in this country, and it came about with President Obama becoming president, which they hated. So they're willing to do anything, and as you said, nothing would surprise us anymore from the Republican Party. But they're willing to do anything to win, and already we've heard these recordings, these text messages. One only has to look at Trump and what he did with January 6th. We see what Fox is doing. And we're at the point now where they've been effective, at least in certain states, in quelling any type of voting which is fair.
Right.
Because you stop the registrations, you make it difficult for people with records, or if they haven't paid this or that. So it's very, very depressing. And I'm almost at the point of saying, well, Dave, maybe you are lucky not to have to think about that, but I don't want to go there because the place you've been is still tough as it is. But now that you're back in this state, now you have to say, oh shit, that shit now,
Well, it's interesting to say. I'll comment on that a couple ways. When you asked me to join this page, and also the broadcast, and I jumped at it, there were two really reactions to the name. Not of people who knew us or knew what we were about. Oh no, the country's not divided. You're wrong. Okay.
Right. Right.
And the other is divided we stand. Well, that's you, right? That's you.
Or we must be united. We must be united.
Well, and that was another. You don't even. But those things you don't hear anymore because the country is divided. We're not going to be united. So we better damn well figure out how we're going to run a country without being united. And then thirdly, I see some wearing down. It would be interesting. The big thing is what happens at Thanksgiving dinner, right? With half the family Republicans, half the family Democrats or independents or whatever. But I know with the few remaining people who talk to me from the early years that view themselves as conservatives or Republicans, we pretty much almost just laugh at it and say, just shut up. Well, I'm not done arguing over it, but that's a very small number, right? And then every once in a while I'll see him post something political. And then I will come after him just simply because I don't think people should be able to post things politically and not be prepared for the other side to answer it. And that goes for our side too. I mean, that's just something that I think goes because I've met a few conservatives. I put that and they said, well, yeah, they said. You mentioned Fox News. You've been a follower of Rupert Murdoch. I know that I'm just going to reveal tonight. I know about your secret Rupert Murdoch doll. That you tuck it every night.
Is he the one I stick the pins in?
Yeah, now the one that you hug and you say, all things being equal, could I wake up and be Rupert tomorrow?
Right.
No. What did you think about the Dominion? And
I'm going to tell you
Fox.
exactly what I think about it. Ron knows this. I get in these strange thought patterns, Dave, when I listen to music alone in my room. Sometimes Ron will catch me, and I'm like acting out things, and I in my head, because again, I'm not a violent person or like that, but I'm so frustrated with what's going on. So I develop these scenarios in my head, like the Walter Mitty type of thing,
Right.
almost. And this whole thing with Dominion and Sean Hannity, and these people cannot admit the truth. So I went through this series of, I don't know, scenarios in my head where I actually had the ability to I know it sounds crazy, to deal with Sean Hannity personally. I'm not going to go into it other than it becomes almost like a real thing in my head. And it's bothered me so much on different levels. Number one, I'm kind of upset with Dominion because I thought, well, why couldn't they just hold out and let's take this thing to court? But then I have to remember they are a private company and they are kind of nailing them, and they will go after Sidney Powell and Giuliani. Uh, but I'm still not happy, and I'm just hoping that Smartmatic will take care of business. It's
Well,
good that they scared the shit out of Fox.
I think last number I saw along the Dominion lines, I think there were 12 uh, others waiting to move in to sue. Um, Now, you're not going to break Fox News financially. Uh, it's
Well,
going to be,
no, but you can break Lou Dobbs, and you can break Sean
and
Hannity, and you can break Sidney
and that's
Powell,
that's where that's what you have to look at.
and then that's where they could cannibalize each other, because if they don't come to their rescue, well, Holder, aren't you going to help me out? And that's when they might squeal.
Well, I've always wondered. I thought it would be cool at one point. What is it? Visit Daniel in the Lion's Den, to sit down when he was alive, Rosh, all the biggies, right? Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, and just say, guys, how much of that shit you speak do you really believe? And they would have to answer honestly, which of course wouldn't happen, and we wouldn't know. Um, Part of me says they don't believe it. They just know, look, we could turn this show around tomorrow night if we want to say outrageous things, right? And suddenly,
Right.
instead of the people we really care about being here, build numbers, outlandish comments, but that doesn't make it news or true
Right.
or even commentary. I think the basic thing, and the problem is that no matter what happens to Fox News, no matter what happens, the family, as I understand it, and they don't call me up for decision making, but there's two factions of the family. One son wants to continue it the way it is, and another one wants to kind of try to get it back, not get it back, but get back to some normalcy. And Tim, you're right. I mean, look, it's like people that believe reality shows. Reality shows are scripted. Okay, they are scripted, at least with an outline. Tucker,
Right.
same thing. I mean, they're scripted. Fox News has admitted in other lawsuits that we are not a news organization. We deal with commentary. So my question becomes, if you're not a news organization, what organization could force you to take news out of your name? I don't think we have an oversight that big. You know what I mean? So in other words, pretty much they can call themselves whatever they want, even though they decide to choose and pick and choose the name at the time it benefits them. Right? Yeah. I was talking to Judy's stepbrother, or one of Judy's stepbrothers, who, as I came out of this cocoon, I hadn't talked to him for a while, and he's a good guy. He's what I call he's been a lifelong Republican. He's trapped in fiscal conservatism. He came from kind of tough times. Judy's family, not a lot of wealth, and he got a lot of wealth. Not got a substantial amount of wealth. His wife is also a pretty high-priced attorney in Philadelphia, and you start hanging with these people, and so we're just having a conversation, and we kind of agreed we wouldn't talk about politics this time. And of course, I had to break it. I said, "Quark, I got that, but I just don't understand. Help me out here. Donald Trump, former president of the United States, gets indicted, correct?
Right.
And his poll numbers go up." And he said, "Well, that's clear. Why?" I says, "Well, people who know anything about it know that's just a bogus witch hunt." Now, not only is that not true, it also doesn't explain why his numbers went up. But that in of me was a real cautionary sign. Not that I didn't expect it, but I think there's a part of all of us who hope that Donald Trump, um, won't run, can't run, whatever. But right now, he is a presumed front runner of the Republican Party. And during this period of time when he's been back in the news, right, with Stormy and all this, um, his numbers have gone up, and DeSantis's have gone down.
Plummeted,
Now,
right?
I'm not so sure, in all honesty, that I would rather have Donald Trump than DeSantis in the White House.
Right.
DeSantis is conniving, but he's smart. The one thing you never say about Donald Trump is not an intelligent man. He said, sometimes I question whether he has any humanity at all.
He's emotional. I mean,
Well, he reacts. Yeah, he reacts, And so what happens is, what I do find interesting, and Brian, I'll put it to you, maybe somebody out in the audience would comment, as we look at 2024, and we have a long way, but we'll look at it from time to time. I'm going to use a sports analogy here, which I try not to. I've just removed war analogies from politics. I can still use sports analogies, but not war analogies. Right now, the Republicans have a pretty deep bench of people that are well known, right? Or could be in position to do same. Okay? If, for whatever reason, Joe Biden either chooses not to run or can't run, what Democrats emerge?
Well, first of all, there's a problem because usually it's the vice president who's next
Correct.
in line,
Absolutely.
and then she's going to feel like she's been stiffed. And of course, there are a number of Democratic candidates who would, love to take a position. I mean, I've seen some of the attorneys involved on with the impeachment trial are now Congress people. You've got AOC, who eventually will be of age to become president. She'll want to get involved.
I don't think there's any question. But she's
the centrist, and there are other. I mean, mainly a lot of your African American congressmen, Hakeem Jeffries, these are people who are probably next in line.
But my point is, all those names you have to really follow politics somewhat closely to know, right?
Right, but I think that.
But DeSantis, you don't
change so quickly that it could. Culture doesn't change that quickly, but politics.
No, I agree. I mean, certainly Bill Clinton came out of nowhere, right? Well,
right.
Actually, that's not true.
Jimmy Carter did.
And Jimmy Carter, yes. Jimmy Carter probably actually more than Clinton, because Clinton had laid some groundwork with some speeches and things, more than Carter. And of course, we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, Brian, so I have not been on the show since May. Now I'm back. In that period of time, you were doing the show. You were still following. There's a name, Gavin Newsom. He will certainly want to put his name in the governor of California. What about from then to now? What's the thing that surprises you most about America? So from almost a year, but from May to now, what thing surprises you the most?
You have left.
Yeah, not because I've left.
I'm just saying that's certainly not the political divide. I've got to think for a second.
Sure.
I think, well, there's probably two or three things, but number one, the courts, that's a problem because that's become so political where,
right,
this may not seem like a big topic right tonight, but it still irks me that Steve Bannon, a guy who's been convicted, but the judge gives him an out, and then so the conviction essentially means nothing. Then you have the Supreme Court, which, you look at what Clarence Thomas has done. You see that in many cases they're willing to back. It has become political. That bothers me. Also, the one thing that I do think is kind of surprising, but it's not surprising now, the Republican Party is, with the war in Ukraine, I'm actually surprised that has not exploded. And it is kind of interesting how some Republicans have taken the side of Russia, which I shouldn't think of as being, so off the wall. And the other thing with climate change, we talk about it from time to time. It has gotten worse, and it will get worse. And still, it's so difficult to get the world behind it. So we're almost waiting for that catastrophe to happen. So in the last 10 months, I don't know which has been more on my mind, but in truth, I've kind of anticipated these problems, and that's why I probably haven't been any more depressed than I have been, 10 months
prior
ago,
to,
maybe.
right.
But it was difficult without you because there is that camaraderie, that
Right,
commiseration that helps
right.
you get through it. And when you're alone, and then I'm lucky enough to be blessed to have, the small group of people who, show up here every Saturday night who say, look, we know how you feel. It's, some people may think I'm on here to lecture people. I'm not. I'm getting it back from people where I can feel so okay. I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I'm going down on the Titanic, but I'm going with people who are willing to talk to me on the way down. And
Of
so
all
I
those
really
things,
can't. I really can't say there's any one thing that's so surprising in the last 10 months. I'd probably have to go to you to ask that because
well,
you
I'll
kind
be
of
honest
stay
with
out
you.
of the picture, and then boom, you're back. You might
Right.
be able to see it better than I can.
No, I don't think that. I think one of the things, and this is not an endorsement. I think one of the things that surprises me is we're not in worse shape in 10 months. Not, you know what I mean? We are worse shape,
Well,
but we're not
we didn't
even.
get we didn't have a civil war yet. That's for sure.
Well, no, no, I'm saying, it doesn't get better. The gentleman that you spoke of, and I use gentleman as pejoratively as a term as it could be used, Clarence Thomas. It boggles my mind. Not what Mr. Thomas has done, which is basically flat out accepted money for privilege, right? But the fact that the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, has no regulation over its Supreme Court justice. I'm going to talk about that tonight, Anthony. A little different thing, but yeah, I bring that up. That's a good point to make up. So, what do you do, Brian? I don't. You have a Supreme Court. Nobody should be above the law, but they don't even have a law to judge them by, right? I mean, think
Right?
about that.
They're above the law.
They by the day they assume, I hereby swear. Now, where would hey, hi, Environmental Coffee House, is the fact that Zandy is the fact that how do you get that now? Now, I would be interested to know, and maybe I'll do some research on this now that I'm back. I would be interested to know why there are regulations on Congress, regulations on the president, right? Why did the founding fathers and then those following them never put any regulations on the Supreme Court? And there's got to be, I don't mean a conspiracy reason. I'm just
Right.
saying there has to be some reasons. I've always felt that, simple Lord Acton view, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, meaning the closer you are to absolute power, which the Supreme Court is about as close as you get.
Right.
The temptation is great. Now, we relied for a while on the good nature between Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Judge Anthony Scalia. They were polar opposites, right? One arch liberal, the other arch conservative. I mean, they did things together. They shared family, but that now we don't have that on the court. It's just as divided as every as everywhere else we look. And then the fact is that when you have a court as politically out of whack, 6-3, as it can be, both, you're going to look at the decision. Of course, they're going to do it that way.
Right.
I've said before, I said all along, John Roberts from time to time will vote differently than maybe conservatives would expect him to, but it doesn't matter now. He could do that every vote. It's still 5-4, right?
And he has kept himself out of the issues that have confronted him about Justice Thomas and what
Right.
Thomas has done. He just won't address it. And that, of course, isn't unexpected because when he was presiding over the impeachment hearings, I mean, he was worthless. He was just absolutely worthless.
I would like, things change, Brian, right? We all make decisions that at one point in our lives that we kind of regret or would do over, if not regret. I wonder that today, as we sit here, I wonder how Joe Biden really feels. He can't say how he feels about being very much a champion of Judge Thomas over Anita Hill. And he really was.
I mean,
He was one of the leading charges, of saying, and of course, had Anita Hill, it's all about timing, right? Had Anita Hill maybe that come up after the beginning of the Me Too, kind of thing. Although I think what surprises me, Brian, you asked that, so the thing that surprises me most is about the things that were hot and aren't right now, maybe somewhat. But the things that continue on, it's just it's a kind of a daily rule. So now abortion is back on the table, right? With the
Right.
hearing in the Supreme Court, and behind that is something else. And behind
Ten
that is something
Commandments
else.
are now in classrooms in Texas. I mean,
Now that's going to be an interesting case, because basically one one of the precepts, of America is a wall between church and state. To say, and I hate ignorant people who don't look at things. America was not, the forefathers were not Christians. If anything, they were deists.
yes, right.
If anything, they worshipped science. Thomas Jefferson
Right.
wrote his own Bible, which you can read. I mean, he took the things out that are unbelievable and left the things that are in. So this idea now, I'm sure you've heard the joke. I said, if you want proof of there is no God, look at the 10 Commandments he gave. I could do better than that sitting on my ass stone cold drunk. And there's some truth to that, right? I mean,
Well, the first
things,
4 commandments have nothing to do with right and wrong. It has to do with kissing the ring of this thing.
well, come on, look, people can be deeply spiritual, people can be deeply religious. That's fine. That's them. I'm consider myself spiritual, not religious, and I also consider myself, like Kurt Vonnegut, a humanist. And the idea of it is, my problem is with formal structures come bad things. And you got to remember not to just pick on the Catholic Church, but once upon a time, that was all there was, right? I mean, if you were a Christian, you were Catholic.
Right.
That was it. And
So
then, of
unless you
course,
were
you had
Eastern Orthodox, but that's a different story. You're talking about the United States.
well, not even at first. I mean,
Right.
that came after. So you started there, and of course, when you take, I mean, again, sorry, it just doesn't fly. I learned, I don't know how old I was, 7 or 8. That there was no tooth fairy. Well, that the idea of tooth fairy tracks with me about as well as deciding that a pope appointed by others is infallible because he puts on a hat. Come on. Now, you could also get, I'm not going to look at all these kinds of things. Religion has its purpose again, right? It can help people. But something, as most of the people watch the show know, my grandchildren are in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. My son is a professor at 3 universities, but he does his teaching there. And that is the heart of Bible Belt, right? That's Bible country. And you drive by and you see these mega churches, and you see these preachers taking on a political stance. And now you've got the 10 Commandments in. So this wall is kind of breaking. And I don't know who's going to shore it up, Brian. I don't see the Supreme Court. Maybe they'll come through with a 5-4 vote. I can't see it.
I couldn't see how could one see it when you have the Federal Society. I mean, again, this is not something where I want to think of conspiracies. I don't think you have to have a conspiracy for this kind of thing, but I think it's kind of obvious that the court has become political.
That's that, and they would be the same way. They would feel the same way if it were the reverse numbers, and there is some truth to that, okay? Because a lot of times my politics and my conscience combined, right? I would always hope if a decision came down to politics and conscience, I would decide on conscience first. I can't say that I do, but that would be my hope. But other people, it always amazes me. We're talking about the Pope and we're talking about these Southern religious leaders. It always amazes me, Brian, because by nature, I'm not a follower. I mean, I'm just not.
No, you're not.
I never.
You
I
go on
don't mean
your
that.
own road.
But what I'm saying is, I almost, if I had a nickel for every time I was called in the bosses in both reporting and education, I'd be relatively wealthy now. Yeah. No, but the idea of it is, I just don't understand how people can blindly follow other people. I've never understood that. If you find somebody you can believe in, like I believe Bruce Springsteen puts on a hell of a concert, so I can believe in that. But this idea of because he said or she said or the book said, where you live, Brian, if you were to come out and make a left out of the cul-de-sac, where we are, and so go away from the high school, you know what I mean? So you're going down North Park Drive, but you're going left toward the medical center, right? Mm-hmm. There's that church on the straight ahead at the light. And they would always, I always thought it was funny, it just stuck with me.
Saying there.
and they have the board out front. And oh, this is years ago, maybe 30 years ago. Do you want to know about the end of the world? We have the answers. I'm like, what? The Book of Revelations? Come on, man. That's. But anyway,
Well,
neither here.
when you were out, I did from time to time talk about international politics and Russia, and this will relate to the question about people they're following. People always ask, why has Russia been that way for the last 800 years? And I brought up really Russia and China with Genghis Khan, and even in China, I think 1 in 200 people still have Genghis Khan's DNA. Even though Genghis Khan and the Mongols were eventually, pushed back, that type of authoritarianism never left, and it was entrenched. And to this day, in China and in Russia, you have these strong governments where these people, hook, line, and sinker. But now there are reasons for that, and this is what I think we should probably get into, and that is, for example, how can anyone but be a follower if the people above you control the press, if they control the military, if they control communication systems, if they control the governors, and which is essentially what Putin did after 2000. He basically reduced the governors of their oblasts, which are kind of like provinces in Canada,
Right.
where these governors had their power reduced, if not entirely eliminated. So it's not surprising to me that human beings are followers
Well,
because of this power play and this control. And I think these people who have control know that if I'm going to continue this, there's certain things that have to be done, and it does involve power, and it means one group has to be powerful and the other group has to be weak or perceive themselves to be weak.
true.
Now, I don't know if that's essentially what's going on when you say, well, how do people follow? There's also the fact that you have, as you know, I'm a determinist, so that the parents tell you this, dad said you had to, not my father, but dad says you should hit the dog with the newspaper if it pees on the floor, and then rub its nose, and then the father before that told him that, and the one before that. So it's the determinism, the cause and effect has been built in for so long that it certainly isn't surprising that after 2,000 years you have 2 billion people who will be followers, no matter where that actually leads.
Of course, and you're talking about ultimate power. So I'm going to say, first of all, in some countries it's much easier to resist. Russia not being one, America. It's easier to resist. I can go out tonight. Where I live, 4.1 miles from the White House. If I get a megaphone loud enough and say disparaging things about Joe Biden all night, and they could arrest me for being a nuisance, right, for noise pollution, but they couldn't do anything else. Try that with Putin, see how long that lasts.
Right, see how long it would last.
Now, but the people I was talking about, so I kind of have a different feeling on that, the governmental power. What worries me more is the people that follow people, like I say, church power, right? Or another one, influencers. 30 years ago, we didn't have this thing called influencers, right? And that's because we didn't have social media. And what's great, again, good and bad, what's great about social media is nobody controls it. Really, they don't, okay? You might get caught here or there. Good. The idea of it being, let me check for here, that people look for guidance, I guess is what I'm saying. But there's certain things that are just outlandish to me. With the Ku Klux Klan, even with left-wing groups. Okay, I've spoken before on this. I really admired the hell out of the Occupy group. I really did. But they had a problem, and I spent a lot of time. Well, I spent quite a bit of time with them here in D.C. talking to them, and they had that wonderful naivete that they thought they could run it as a collective, and you can't really. They needed some spokesman. Yeah, well, and that's the thing, of course. Now, Sandy, I don't know. The question I ask, and I'm just posing this not to you, to anyone. Who's the better environmentalist, Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Who's the better environmental party, the Republicans or the Democrats? But having said that, that might not be enough. We might need more than that to say.
And the question is, would Biden have done what he is doing with the Willow Project had there not been that pressure, political pressure, for him to do what he feels he has to do to be able to defeat the Republicans? I mean,
and that's something, Brian, is a very astute point.
But I don't agree with what Biden's doing.
Oh, no,
I'm just saying.
No. Well, look, if you're going to be a politician, you're going to make political decisions, correct?
Right.
How can you do anything else? And so much of that is
the issue about politics, and that's why we have to take it seriously.
But I think one of the other things when you're talking about Russia. Oh no, I know that. I understand. No, I understand that, Sandy. I need all that I can get. But the idea I was thinking about, we're going to come down. I'll pick that up in a minute, Anthony. Let me finish this. Keep that up there, Brian. The other thing that I think surprises me a little bit. I was born in 1952, so I'm very much a child of a number of things, but I'm very much a child of the Cold War. Okay, Cold War was lurking around me even before I knew, right? And I find myself today really wondering sometimes. We're coming closer to fascism. I just never thought that would happen, right? That we would get closer to Russia. Somehow I naively believe not friendly,
almost at authoritarianism, and then you make that jump.
And that's what I'm saying, right? And that's what I'm saying. And I just didn't see that, or I didn't want to put the comment up again that was just there, Brian. Is the Republican Party about done with Trump, or do you think he will galvanize enough support to run again and even get the nomination? Okay, remember, anti-guy, I'm just one person with one opinion. My understanding is, and I'm going to speak on this next week, so there's a teaser to come in, right? And this is a short answer, so we'll go into more. Can a candidate run for president while being indicted? And the answer is yes. Nothing precludes him or her from running. Can a president run from prison? And the answer is yes. It's been done before. Do you know who that was, Brian, who ran from prison?
Yes. Actually, I do know that. That's Eugene Debs.
You got Eugene Debs, one of the great radicals, and he actually ran from prison. So back to, does Trump want to be president? Of course he does. He wants it for a number of reasons. For his ego, for revenge, for whatever. Will Trump do everything he can to try to capture that nomination? The answer is yes. Will he be successful? A couple of weeks ago, I might have said, now I'm starting to waffle a little bit more. He may well be. I think we should all be prepared for one of two certainties, and it could be a third. One is it's either Trump or DeSantis or not Nikki Haley or Scott from South Carolina, but somebody else. Vote for president that was indicted? The answer is yes, and there you are. So everything, we said that. Silly Wonka, I hope you're right, man.
Right. Silly Wonka, you know as well as Dave and I know that in the general, there are enough votes for us to win. But what worries me, again, when you look at I'm going to bring up the Steve Bannon thing. I could bring up the Kyle Rittenhouse, the courts, and the state legislatures. And people think I'm absurd when I say this stuff, but it's just, this can be a reality. This is where you make that jump from democracy to authoritarianism to fascism. And again, they're desperate because they feel they're cornered. They see, ever since Obama became president, that the United States is browning, and they don't want it that way. And that is correct. Racist. So they're going to do everything possible. Even this lunatic judge, who wanted to put out the abortion pill. He's got a pass too. We can go into that direction later.
Right.
But, I fear, Dave. That's what I fear is that they will somehow pull off what Trump wanted to pull off.
I mean, here's a brilliant statement. It depends on who runs against whom. Of course it does. Okay, of course it
I
does.
would agree with Sandy right there. I'd like to see Sheldon Whitehouse. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
He's from a small
I
state. That's tough to.
no. You know what though? See, I'm a little different. I some political thought is you don't prime. I think primaries make you stronger, as long as the person who loses can come out and at least lukewarmly or wholeheartedly support the winning candidate. The problem becomes is if you get the pullback. Like Bernie, I was for Bernie, but I realized once he could no longer be
That'd be
the
honey.
there you go. Veg, you send that in. You might win. You might win the slogan award,
That's
right?
good.
Um, again, something I said earlier, and I wish more Americans would look at this. The biggest thing about the president is they set the tone for the country. After that, anything can happen, right? And they're also going to react like with if Trump had been there, would we be doing the same thing with Ukraine? My gut feeling is we would not. Okay, that's my gut feeling that he was sided more with.
Oh, absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Ukraine
And
would
so
have been done.
now a couple of things. We got plenty of time, but a couple of things I wanted to address tonight, if I could. When I just kind of when I left the show, we had three major kinds of shootings, right? Yeah, true. Delaware is a
True,
very
although
small state.
because he was really known in the Philadelphia area, he's kind of
and Scranton and
seemingly
Scranton
Pennsylvania
Scranton, right.
senator.
Scranton is his home. I mean,
Right.
it was his home. There were kind of three. I mean, you could but lump shootings into gun violence into three basic categories in no particular order, right? You had the horror of school / movie / church group gathering shootings, right? Which grabbed the headlines and should. You had the shootings that are even larger, and that's gang related or person on person, domestic abuse, all those kinds of things. And then you had the third category, which police shooting down innocent victims. But something is growing, and it's very troubling for me. And I just want to talk a little bit about tonight. I'm going to call it my mistaken identity shootings. We've been seeing that. We've been seeing that more and more in the news. Now, obviously, just recently, we saw one young man who went to the wrong house to pick up his brother, and he was shot. We saw in Texas the two cheerleaders went in the wrong car; they were shot. We see another woman, Caitlin Gillis, pulled in the wrong driveway, and she was shot. Now, the problem becomes they're all outgrowths, of course, of the idea of self-defense gone, stark lunacy, right? We have a long-standing tradition of self-defense. I choose not. I mean, like I said before in the show, no biggie, but I agree, Kim. My father was from Texas and raised in certain ways, so he wanted me to be able to handle weapons and guns, and I did. I learned to shoot. I was okay with it. I just never liked them. Never wanted to hunt, so that was out. That wasn't me. So I've never owned a gun. But I could, if I did have a gun and my life were threatened, I believe that I could use that gun and to remove that threat and not lose a whole lot of sleep over it. But to stand your ground, how does somebody knocking on your door fall under stand your ground? Right. They can't. Now, is there more to the story? I don't think so. I think it was a young black man knocking on the door of an old white guy who had a gun. It's that simple. Really? Really? I would ask tonight for all of us to think about, for those of us who aren't African American, how does an African American parent on a Saturday night release their son or their daughter without a gnawing pit in their stomach, right? Will they return? The cheerleaders, I mean, we're supposed to be active in school, and you get in the wrong car? Really? And then, of course, the other one, the wrong driveway. And I think that, again, I don't know the number. I should have tonight. I didn't look it up. I will for next show. How many states have some version of stand your ground? Florida was in the forefront, right? But others, I want to say, I don't even want to say how many states, but I know it's more than Florida. And then comes the hypocrisy on the Republican side, which I always smirk at. Okay. Republicans, if you ask about guns, they say many things. But one of the things they seem to always say You can't ban guns because bans don't work. You've heard that, right?
Right.
A standard Republican line for as long as I can remember. Yet the same group of people believe they can and should ban abortions,
Right.
contraception, books, drag
Well
queens,
said.
honest history lessons, vaccines, and talking about any issues that involve LGBTQ people. Now, hypocrisy is not a sin, but I don't like hypocrisy. Be consistent. Now they say, well, guns are different than this. No, 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 no. I would suggest to you, with the exception of abortion, if you took that, I do not see abortion as murder. But unless you took it that way, guns are the biggest threat of that group that I read, right? That group of things. They're the ones that can take a life away. And the other thing I want to talk about tonight, remember Sesame Street? I used to like that to watch that with my son. That's a very cool show, in its time, right? And they would have, today's show is brought to you by such and such. Well, I'm going to bring you a short segment here, brought to you by the letter K. Ready?
We're ready.
And in the sake of fairness, I'm actually going to attack a Democrat and a Republican. Which one would you like me to attack first, Brian? It makes no difference to me.
Let's go for the Democrat first.
All right. And the Democrat tonight that I'd like to call out very seriously is a name that you know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what am I talking about? Okay. When Kennedy first started to enter into politics, he was very much in the forefront of the environmental movement, especially out of New York State, right? And he was doing some really, really pretty good things. Now, I don't have a conversation with him, but the Kennedy today is, first of all, he's probably the best known anti-vaxxer in the country.
Right. And he's also
secondly,
married to Cheryl, I forget her name, who was on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Right.
I forget her name.
And then he's a conspiracy monger. He's running around talking about things that are absolutely insane.
Right.
And then he's really fallen from the Kennedy mystique, which is a mystique, it's not really true, but to this environmental, pretty good guy. Look at him to run, kind of down the road. I would classify him tonight as just a dangerous kook.
Yes, he is.
And what makes him so dangerous is the fact of the Kennedy name, right? It's just like the Trump name was a brand, the Kennedy name is a brand.
Right.
Okay. Maybe not so much as it was 30 years ago, but still a brand. Kennedy evokes, for many, it evokes JFK. For others, it evokes Ted Kennedy. For others, it evokes RFK Jr.'s father, right? But it is. I mean, Kennedy is. If you were to ask 100 people, "What's up with the Kennedys?" They're in politics, right? They would at least know that. Now, in 2005, I went back and read 2 articles that he wrote because they were cited in his other articles. He wrote one for Rolling Stone and one for Salon.
That's it.
About that.
About Joey just got it for me. Cheryl Hines.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Joey's like our producer, behind the scenes. Hey,
yeah, Joey has all the numbers and names.
Joey, I need this. Joey, I need that. Anyway, in 2005, he wrote these 2 articles, got quite a bit of play, and about 10 years later, they've been completely retracted as 100% patent bullshit. Now, why am I bringing up Mr. Kennedy tonight? He's declared to run for president in 2024 for the Democratic Party with that name recognition factor. Now let's look at it. Could he defeat Joe Biden? I don't think so, but I don't know, right? Could he beat Kamala? I don't know. And that's good, Bella, and that's fine if you want to have him. He's not my guy. He was. He's not now at all. I don't believe that. For example, think about this. Now, I understand if my father had been assassinated, I wouldn't really know what to think. But do you realize, Brian, he's going around the country now and saying that Sirhan did not that he didn't act alone, that he did not kill his father. Wow. Wow. I mean, I remember seeing it that night. I didn't see it that night because it was California time, but I saw it the next morning. I remember big Roosevelt Greer,
Right.
football player, just Rosie standing over him, yeah, and just standing there over the body. And I think to me that's one of the simplest ones. Sirhan shot, he got caught. Maybe he had some help. I don't know. But excuse me. Another of his premise right now is 5G. The transport thing, high-speed towers, is to harvest our data and send it out. Right? Really? Really? 21-year-old kids can do that, right? They can harvest the data and send it out, as we just found out. I also have to classify him as one of the super spreaders, and he's very active in it, of COVID misinformation, which ties into his anti-vaxxer background. Now, you can say all you want, or anyone can say all they want. I don't know. Here, the USA Today, he just announced, right? USA Today did a poll. And according to this poll, now remember, we can be skeptical of polls, and polls could be 12. Oh, I got all that. But according to their poll, 14% of those voting for Joe Biden in 2022 would today vote for RFK instead. So I'm not trying to say, let's put blame on. My point is that truth is fading on both sides, right? And it fades by leaders. And Robert Kennedy is wrong. He's entitled to be wrong, except he's Robert Kennedy. Sometimes, when you're anointed into a family or into a business or into something, you have a moral responsibility, an ethical responsibility to try to, and I'm sure he would say he is preaching the truth, and I'm sure he would say he is being covered up. Now, the other Brian, I'm sorry tonight because I know he's one of your personal favorite musicians. I'm going to go to the right now. K, right? So Kennedy. Let's talk a little bit about Kid Rock, my man. Ugh. All right. Now, Kid Rock had a really cool song, and Joey, find out for me, I forget the name, but it was a little midget guy that came out on him originally, and he died. And that's pretty cool. I mean, the Kid Rock did that. And he has gone downhill to where he's like the modern age Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent had one good song. It was called Journey to the Center of My Mind. It was a band called the Amboy Dukes. And the rest of his time, he's just wearing a loincloth and playing terrible guitar and writing bad songs. So anyway, a name that it'll be interesting to see if the name takes off. I don't think it will. But anyway, it was an influencer named Dylan. I'm going to check the spelling here. Yeah, Mulvaney. So, Dylan Mulvaney. And Dylan had, as we were talking about influencers early, he had approximately about 10 million followers. All right. And Devin came to the understanding that while he was born a male, he should have been a female or whatever it came to. And so he went through the gender change process, right? And for a year, he documented that on YouTube. And of course, being kind of pure in interest. I mean, I never looked at any of his clips. I'll go back sometime next week and look at them. Build up the following, and they build up the following. And suddenly, it was 365 days, right? Now, I have never been the L, the G, the P, the Q, the T, and I don't mean that lightly. I am homosexual male. That's what I was. I believe I was born that. I know I am that today. So I'll defer to any others who see differently. But I would think that it would be relatively a hard transition and decision to switch genders, I would think. You know what I mean? You'd have to be pretty sure, of strength. And I actually have 3 friends now, one of whom we won't discuss, whose daughters have declared that they want masculine pronouns and see how far they go. And that's fine. But Bud Light, who had somehow hooked up with this on the site, I don't know if they were sponsoring him or whatever, they made up some special beer cans to celebrate the 365-day journey of Delvin Mulvaney. Well, Kid Rock having nothing to do now that Trump's out of office and being totally clueless to perform music, decided to get some publicity of his own. I don't know if you followed, that was interesting. So he took several cases of Bud Light and his guns and went out there and fired at him. So that in turn, oh yeah, Silly Wonka. In addition to RFK Jr., Marianne is the other one who's declared for the Democratic side. Now, I would say to Kid Rock and anybody, this may come to shock to you, but queer men and women for a long, long time have been drinking your beer. And so, you know, again, back we started early with social media. Do we not have social media? Dylan wouldn't have put his trans influence on, right? Wouldn't have had a forum. That's not necessarily a bad thing that he did. I think it may help someone else in the long run, as you talk about the process. But certainly Kid Rock wouldn't have his either, right? And so now suddenly you take an issue that is somewhat complex in America, the idea of gender, and we just complicate it more and more and more. I would ask you, Brian, again, I kind of know the answer to this. It's a kind of obvious one. Does it really matter to you what sexual orientation anyone adopts other than you and Ronnie?
That's absolutely correct. I wouldn't have a care in the world about it.
Ronnie's often told me that you've almost driven her that way, but that's a story for another time. And I would say the same thing. And you know, and people say, wait a minute, what about your son? No, that's, you know, I wouldn't even care about Judy. It just probably would lose her, right? I mean, you know, we probably wouldn't be married.
And that's I think what Sandy's saying here is important to say too. Is that this is what Fox News is generating.
Oh, absolutely, Sandy. I mean, you've been in the forefront of the environmental thing for a long time, and it must get very frustrating for your end. You know, you put out something important on your web, or one of your shows that really means something, and you get X, viewers, and then Kid Rock fires a gun at a bunch of beer cans, and suddenly that's national news. But that was it. Now, there are the things this week. That's really what I kind of wanted to talk about. And again, as we can see, that gun pattern waving in, the gun pattern of Kid Rock. I don't like you. Politics. I'm going to shoot your beer. Really? Okay. What about this? Let's do a call out. Does anybody out there? We have about half hour left, give or take. If anybody has something they want to discuss or talk about, it would be great to do that. Anthony, you're absolutely right. Okay. Now, Anthony, I'm going to ask you a question if you want to respond to it. You are so right that I don't understand how anyone could argue with you. But probably more than 50% of the Americans might, right? Or close to. Kind of what's up with that? I don't, I mean, I just
never got that whole homophobia kind of thing. Like, why does somebody have to be homophobic?
Well, you know what? I mean,
I can understand you don't want, I remember when I was, I saw Frank Marino with a friend and his wife, and some guy tried to come up with me, and it actually bothered me. It really did. Because now, if you start doing something in my face and coming on to me, I'm not going to go for that. But as far as homophobic, I wouldn't even think about it.
Well, and again, of course, that gets to some of your groundings and what you feel. I just don't get it. I mean, I've joked, and it's not really funny, but I mean, I used to say that to idiots who'd come up with that, and they'd be arguing with this. Do you realize, why are you opposed to homosexual men? If there were more homosexual men, those of us who aren't would have a better shot with women. Now, that's very disparaging. I wasn't disparaging women. What I was doing was disparaging their utter insanity.
It's really strange how they take that tact, how they get so upset with it. It's almost beyond belief. You just wonder if there's any latent homosexuality.
Well, that's always been true. I think there's probably some. I think it's more a fear, of the unknown. Remember, a lot of it's biblical conditioning too. Right. Sodomizing Sodom. I mean, homosexualizing a bit. Now, if there were, I'm assuming, and I don't know, if some cultures, now Greeks didn't, but if some cultures had a prohibition against homosexual behavior, I think some of that might have been, we need to populate the world. I mean, the entire world, right? So, you needed people because people were dying 1 and 2, or 1 and 3. Two would die, one would be born. So there might be something in the background of that. I mean, I guess if you believe the Adam and Eve myth, maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. But again, I just struggle with this idea, and I forget who put it up there. Somebody said, we're all just human. I mean, I'm not saying let's sit around the fire and sing "Kumbaya," but what I'm saying is, I really, oh, that's just the beginning of them, my man, the guy. You'd have some bare bookshelves. You're right, absolutely, 100% right. And that's the thing. Notice how many of these tie in together. Anti-gay, a lot of gay writers, a lot of writers writing about gay situations because they haven't been, love is love, you're right, Kim, haven't been out there. Now, there's a show that I'm watching. I usually don't recommend fiction, but I really like it. If anybody has Apple TV, I would recommend you take a look at it. I think I just finished season 3 today. And it's called For All Mankind. And Brian, basically what it does is it's a alternate history of what would have happened had Russia landed on the moon first. And from there, the story branches out, and we're already to Mars. But anyway, in this Mars, which was the Mars trip, was in the 3rd season. And it's interesting how they come back and float through and pick up history from other things, what's there. But anyway, they interview from space. They interview the astronauts, and this one young black guy comes out of the closet and admits he's gay, and just creates this ultimate furor, right? Of because this is a time when, being different can bring you death. Except the irony is we're all different. So the idea is in this thing I'm saying about that, and it's interesting to watch the Russians. Long story short, the Russians have some problems with their ship. They have to merge with the Americans, and it's one Russian who's a pretty cool guy, right? He just has a problem dealing with a gay person, and it was just. But there's other storylines in there. Now today, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I think the situation for any type of LGBT person, QT, was better. I still think legally it is, but how much, yeah, there you are. There's a good one. Imagine being female in Uganda. I don't even want to be a male in Uganda, as Idi Amin's old range. But it would be interesting. And sometimes I get a chance to talk to different people. Obviously, we all do. And it's one thing to be in the minority. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I did that wrong. It's one thing to be in the majority and look at the minority and say, you've come a long way, baby, right? The old commercial for female cigarettes. It's another thing to be in that group and see how far you still have to go. And I think that's what's hit us, Brian, from Trump to now. I think many of us, myself included, thought we were on a little bit faster track to better times. And when I say better times, I mean truly not more money, not more this, and I think that reality smacks you in the face. And now, really how far have we come? And these elections coming up, the issues that we'll talk about on the show, the Supreme Court, they will show. We will know in 100 years. Who knows how far or not far we've come. Sometimes I think too, and this is my own personal opinion. Now, could I ask a question, Common Gardner? What are you basing that on? I'm not questioning you. I'm just saying, where is that something you read or that's Mitch McConnell? Because I think there's 2 senators who kind of disappeared, right? You haven't heard much from Mitch recently. I think he had an injury though. And then the other one is Lindsey Graham. You mentioned him earlier. Lindsey's kind of just disappears now. So we're that we can start a whole campaign on our show. Where's Lindsey Graham? Where's Lindsey Graham? Now there's someone. We're talking about LGBTQ. The rumors have been circulating about him for years and years and years and years. If it's true, I feel sorry for him that he has to hide himself. If they're false, I feel sorry for him that they would label that. But it hasn't affected his career. I mean, he's still won in South Carolina. He's still been a very influential senator. Yeah, I won't even be here in 100 years, but people will be here. Well, Sandy and anybody else out there, and we don't know. Uh, it would be interesting, Brian, if forced to make, and you could be as far off base as anyone. How long do you think the Earth has? And they could change tomorrow. I understand
All right.
why,
Well, just
but
asking, me as a layman, I think that the biology of the Earth is rather resilient, though there is that possibility that nuclear
correct.
cataclysm could sterilize the planet. Um, I would think that in some there will be life on this planet. I would imagine for some point in time, and although I do believe climate change to be
Well,
deadly, I just look at the continuum. I don't see it happening, in 2 months or 2 years with the methane
no,
releasing, and then I
no.
don't see that either. I do know this, and I've said this over and over and over again. There's going to have to be a political solution before this thing ever gets done.
And also, Brian, we speak mostly. I mean, we do touch on international politics, but we speak mostly about American politics, right? I mean, that's what the show's
Correct.
about, mostly. And the problem becomes when you're talking about the environment, you're not just talking about America, right? There's no
Right.
way.
This is
There's
why the environmental movement. Like, you look at Extinction Rebellion, and they have these protests in the UK and London Bridge or whatever.
right.
It's important to have these protests, but I want to see if you believe in that, then go to China and go to Russia on a plane and do it. I want you to see that it cannot just be here. It's
No, no,
got to be everywhere, and that's the problem. You're not negotiating with two countries,
right,
and
or even
and
one
it's
country.
it's very myopic to think that you're going to solve the problem. I mean, you have to do something. That's true. You have to do something.
Well, I think,
But
and again, something to support what you're saying. Do something. I've been since 1969. I've been involved in a lot of protests. Okay, not as many as some, more than some others. But every time I protest something, I feel good about just what you said. I'm doing something. Okay, I may be, it may not be effective. I do think sometimes I do warn young people if you get involved in protest, kind of keep your eye out because sometimes they can turn bad very, very quickly,
right,
and you don't want to be part of that. Certainly not as bad as January 6th turned,
large
but
crowds in general are a
but
problem.
but you're hearing now, and some of it I think is just random, verbalizing to get out of things. But I think there were legitimately people who just got caught up in the emotion. Not many, but some. And had they not been there, um, it wouldn't have happened. I don't know why. What was I watching there? It's not important. There was a relatively long clip of January 6th, again, played before whatever this was. Whatever it was, I guess Judy was watching something that was in between. And I hadn't really looked at it for a while, right? Anything video from that. Wow. To even begin to think of that any representative of the United States could say it was no different than any day with tourists. I mean, wow.
Right.
Just wow. I mean, that was a bad scene that could have been a lot worse.
Well, again, they want to rewrite the history because, again, I think this is all part of that idea, Dave, that they know where this country is going, and they say, "Look, we're going to go retrograde here, and
Yeah.
we are going to just turn this thing around, and we're going to have to do something legal because even Jesus will endorse it." So now they're even going to
Well, I mean, yeah.
through semantic fiat, they're going to change even what Jesus meant by this or that. So it's
And one of the problems you have is a large percentage, right, of Americans are of Mexican American descent, correct, or Mexican descent.
Mhm.
And the problem you have there is many of them are not, don't follow the channels that need to be so they can vote, and that's understandable too because they're afraid of being deported back. And when I talk about that, I always think about Brian. You still teach at Christian High School, and you were there then. I believe it's not important anyway. One day, years ago, but you were there, so it's not going to be that long ago. 20 years ago, less. There was a report in Laurel Street that there was a bombing or bomb. They discovered, no, I'm sorry, they discovered the materials for a bomb, right? And what happened is they went to close off the area, right? And it was a credible threat at the time. And so they were picking people up, putting them on buses, and the high school was a safety zone, right? And that's where they would bring them to. And it was interesting. Some people were offended. They didn't have diapers because they just were pulled out of the house, right? They didn't have things, but almost everyone who could had documented papers if they had them, because of course their first thought is the idea that I'm being taken from my home. How is this going to end for me? And again, talking about the tone and tenor, there's still been some questions about the Mexican border and what are we doing? But you don't, I'm not saying I have to go down there and look. The atrocities are not in the news that were when Trump was there, at least as far as I can tell. And I think they would be. I mean, nobody gives Joe Biden a pass. I don't think, well, maybe Jill does, his wife. So, I mean, I think things were going down. And that's what I get at and keep hammering tonight. I just think it's like kind of something I've been thinking about more and more and more, is what does the president really do? What does he or she really do? And all they can really do is set the tone for the country. That's really it. Names, they can veto legislation, but that can be overturned. They can nominate people for positions. They don't have to follow through. You can staff the White House with people, but they only remain at your behest to help you, again, set that tone. It'll be interesting.
Well, Trump seems to think that's not true. The president can do a lot more, and that's the scary part.
And really, what did Trump do? I mean, really, what did he do? Not much. We stopped him a lot of places.
Not as a president, he didn't do anything, right?
No, I mean, Trump, like Trump's just out there. We're talking about the White House. To me, I think I'm kind of thinking about it tonight. One of the students in the first class I ever taught, which would have been 1984, first high school class I ever taught, 86, I guess. And anyway, David Hall, if you've never met him, David is one of the leading true Christian evangelists on the West Coast. He's in Nevada. And his wife, Connie, won Teacher of the Year in Nevada. And they came up, I talked to him this morning, we're going to get together tomorrow night for dinner. But on Monday, Connie will be honored along with 49 other teachers at the White House. And accompanied by David. Now, I really think that David should let me go in his place. I mean, we have the same first name. So if this placemat says David, we should go. My point being setting tones. Do you see Melania? Do you see Melania Trump as First Lady hosting teachers in the White House?
Not anybody I know.
Exactly. And again, so of course we know Dr. Biden, has been an educator most of her life. And so of course it's a passion. But the idea of it is, at least telling 50 teachers this week, you're doing a good job. Thank you. And let's see what we can do better. Because we're going to have a show sometime pretty soon, Brian, clock's running, on the crisis in education, which is almost beyond belief. It's something that you see on a daily basis going into school. I see it on a kind of a residual basis, seeing it down here. But I have the advantage of seeing the schools where we live, Arlington, Virginia, among the best and richest in the country. And then the schools that I worked in DC, among the poorest. And let me just pick your brain a little bit, especially the group's brain. Because sometimes if you're too close to a subject, I'm an ex-educator, you're an educator, you don't always see what's the cliche, forest for the trees, that kind of thinking. But ladies and gentlemen, if you're not a teacher and you don't know teachers, I would worry very much about the state of public education in many, many areas. And you could probably almost overlap a conservative red, and a liberal blue, school district by school district, and it would probably almost parallel, right? So we'll see what happens.
Well, you've seen that. I mean, not only is it dividing the country, but now this school system have more of these obviously the private schools. So you don't have an egalitarian educational system. It's frightening in that sense.
And we all have to make personal,
because there is, in addition to legacy wealth, there's legacy education.
Oh, no question. Okay. I mean, I'll use myself for example. We'll go back to Tim. I'm interested in that comment. I don't. Teachers are old language. Tim, if you just shoot that, something up there for me, it's me being confused, not you being confusing. But you were saying about legacy. Yeah, I mean, you know, my okay, my mother got a college education. I got one. My son got one. It will definitely at this point, Owen and Audrey and Owen will be getting one, and it goes on. So yet there's people right now who will graduate this year being first generation college students, right? The other crisis is, I think, is also economic in nature, and we'll talk about that later when we do an education show. But right now, I'm thinking about when I came out of college in 1973. I was stoned out of my mind. I didn't really care about anything, but the idea was there were more jobs than there were people. I was going to be able to use my degree, no question, right? None. And now that is not the case. You're finding people with postdocs having a hard time. Now, some of them want to work in a specific business or a specific store, or something. And even the biggies, Amazon down here, talked about it before, we'll talk about it again. They're going to open the first phase here in National Landing in May, and they've postponed the second part of their project, and that represents almost 15,000 jobs that may or may not come. And so those jobs would be all high-level jobs that would go to college graduates. Nobody in this area. I mean, we're not talking about the Amazon warehouse workers, right? And you're seeing that a lot. And even my disgust with Mr. Musk, they're having massive layoffs at Twitter.
He's going to be on, I think, on Bill Maher next week. I'm not a fan. I'm not even a fan of Bill Maher anymore.
Well, I think again, we won't go into. I think what happens as the country gets more divided, our entertainers get more divided too. Do you know what I mean? And again, remember, Bill Maher is first of all a comedian, secondly an entertainer.
He's egotistical, and he lost a lot of his audience during COVID, and he's pissed.
Well, okay, but also, like I said, yeah, and Americans change, so what are you gonna do? And of course, when you're talking about media, I was telling you before the show, I watched I don't watch much TV, but I had like a half an hour to kill, and so I watched an episode of Abbott Elementary. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, it's an ABC, right?
ABC. I like the first season better than I did the second, but it's a good way to check in and see what inner city schools are doing through a humorous vein, right? But the problems are real. I mean, they're caricatures, obviously, but to say. So tonight we said no environmental crisis. Education is good. Donald Trump can win and run from. Anthony, it wasn't only in his mouth. I think it was up his butt too. And there you are, Tim. You're back. And that was the point I was going to make about entertainment. Is entertainment is nothing if you do not have viewers or listeners, depending on what your business is, right? This could be, and it's not. This could be the greatest show the world has ever seen. But if it doesn't reach anyone, right?
Right.
What difference does it make? And if we were monetizing this, which I'm glad we're not, and I wouldn't even be involved if we were, the idea would be that we would be different, Brian. You know it and I know it. Now, you might say to yourself, I couldn't do it. And I might say to myself, but say we did. We would not, there's a thing you kind of have to give up if you're going to do that. And, and look at it, whether it's controversy generated or whatever it is.
Right.
Well, Brian, the clock on the wall says it's about that time.
Yes. We've gone at 2 hours.
Yeah, I haven't talked 2 hours for a long time. Anybody, while you got a few minutes while we're closing out, anybody else has a comment for us? If not, for each other? I'll start since I've been here. I always give Brian the last word. First of all, again, thank you for anybody who contacted me during my illness. I appreciate that. I hope, if one thing, remember, and this is not me being, oh, wow. Open heart, triple bypass surgery. Now going on 2 weeks, right? And now, hey, Fred, going on 2 weeks now. And, medicine can do some wonderful things, right? I did miss a beat, a heartbeat, right? That's a bad analogy. I hope I don't miss any more. But the idea of it is, again, just thanks, Brian, for asking me, as you did a long time ago, just to get on the show. because again, we say it, it's so cliched, it's so corny and so whatever. This group right now is about the only group I care to join. I'm talking about
Right.
these people and those, because I've got enough other groups. I don't need to. Been my years in a rock and roll band. I don't need that anymore. And it's just a nice way to spend a Saturday night. And I didn't realize. Thank you, Fred. I assume you were talking about me because Brian never looks well. So I have to.
And now you know he's well.
Yeah, now I know. Well, it is funny, isn't it? We all have these characteristics. And a number of people said to me, "Oh, you're okay. You got a sense of humor back." And I can cross lines with my sense of humor too, as we all can do with that. But that's really nice to be able to smile. That was another thing. I mean, I didn't have a smile, for a long, 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 long time. So anyway, thanks. Now the other thing is, ladies and gentlemen, Brian is still refusing to pay me for my work.
He wants $1.7 million from us folks.
Not from him, from Brian. So if you would just write a really nasty note on his Facebook page to let him know that you're very pleased he's losing weight and he's getting healthier, but just don't be so goddamn cheap.
Well, I keep with the protocols of the channel, and that is we are not monetized. We will not pay anybody. We will not ask for money, and we will not give you any money too. It works. Remember, that's an equal transaction, Dave. That's part of the problem. Okay, so. Hey, Dave, you got just so many people making the comments again.
That's very nice. Again, I can't.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I'm just saying. I just can't thank you. And I can't thank you enough. I mean, people, until you get something like I had, and it's on the relative scheme of things, if 10 is the worst thing that ever happened to you, mine was maybe a 3, right? I mean, honestly, maybe even only a 2. But it really it does. It makes you feel good because people are thinking about you. Concerned about you, and in those moments when you might need it, Kim, send me a message anytime, and then we can just talk. We can just trash Brian. That's what we can do. You don't have to thank that. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for being here. Thank you for that too. I'm going to say something. I mean a lot more. It means a lot coming from you, but it would mean a lot more if it came from, like, say, I don't know, Stormy Daniels or whatever. But that'll be okay. I'm glad you're doing well. It was difficult for you, but you went through. Yeah, I did. Thanks, Anthony. I know you were one of the people that messaged me, and
I'm posting these for some reason. It's not clicking correctly. There we go.
Kim, I gave you the night off next week. Okay, a double Kim piss off. That's my goal for next week.
All right. Well, Dave, I first of all, thank you for coming on tonight, and especially so tonight, given 10 months of hell that you've gone through, and it's been difficult without you here for 10 months. I was never going to stop because, I even said to everybody, Dave's the kind of person who would just tell me, don't stop anyway. Just keep going. You have to keep going. But as you mentioned, I mean, this is a small family of friends of generally like-minded people, and it shows the importance of having friends during these type of times, because we're not out of this at all, and it's even more so now because, Dave, you've gone through a health crisis, and most of us, not all of us, but most of us are generally baby boomers on this channel and on the group page. So we are entering the last third of our lives, and
right.
So therefore we're going to encounter more health problems, and it's a serious thing. And I think we've become very kind people to one another, knowing the situation politically in this country, but also knowing that we only have so much time left, and we don't even know the amount of time that we have left, and even when we're here, we go through these trials and tribulations. So it's very endearing to have people who really do care. And you've said this before, Dave. We're not actually physically seeing people, face to face, like you would in a regular type of friendship. But this is a different world too, and in a certain sense, it's perhaps even more close, and I mean that in a real way,
I think you're right.
because I don't know if this is your experience, but sometimes people, when they meet somebody for the first time, you could be sitting having a conversation with somebody in an airport, and you'll just expose some of the the deepest secrets to people, because you don't know them kind of that well.
Right. No, it happens. Yeah.
It's just kind of odd. It's when we're not around people all the time. Maybe there's this, freeing aspect to being at a distance in a certain sense, and it's kind of a shame that we can't, meet each other. One day, maybe we should have something where we meet somewhere in the middle of the country,
Well,
for a day.
no, not because it's my city, but there's only one place for divided we stand
And
to
that
meet
would be,
Washington
yeah,
D.C.
Washington D.C.
and sit down on the National Mall. Thank you, Veg. I am.
No, I don't. I didn't want to say too much tonight, Veg. Of course, I mean this was very important that that Dave spoke.
And you know what the remark that means the most there from Veg, because I might respect a lot. Could you put that back up?
Sure.
Brian hardly said a word tonight. Now, to me, that also is a sign of a successful show.
He's okay.
When we were musicians, you don't know how many nights I covered Brian's ass while he was exploring some Uranian chord scheme that was no there, and I had to bring him back. But yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, it's just everybody's just thankful. So I mean, it's just very, very endearing to see all this. We got Epi from Scotland, and he's giving you. Epi's been here, and they. It's probably around, I don't know, like 5 a.m. in the morning, 4 a.m. in the morning over there,
right,
in Scotland. So, and Epi more or less religiously watches, this program. So, yeah, it's great. It's great, and these people do care. So, but above all, Dave, it's certainly great to see you back, and it's been, for me as a good friend of yours, I personally feel a lot better, because it's tough when there's somebody that's that close with you and then they're not doing well, and plus the fact that we're always on every week,
right.
It was not easy for me, and that's why every time I started a show, I would always mention you, because I wanted just the aura or the atmosphere of you still being there in some kind of way, just like from I don't know, I thought it was just kind of important, It's tough doing it on your own. I still kept it live. I wasn't gonna. I mean, I did record a few shows, but I think I did every week except for 3. I think there were a couple times when I had to take off a week or two. One time we had a storm a couple weeks ago, but other than that, we continued. So anyway, thank you, Dave, and thank you, everybody. And Dave, let's hope that everything keeps going well for you and you keep getting better. And
that's the plan.
And that goes for all of us.
Oh, whoa.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Tim's my best friend, though, right?
Okay. Whoa. Tim, I've got to tell you this from the bottom of my heart. If you really believe that, Monday morning, first thing, call an eye doctor, okay? Because you've got a real problem there, man. A real problem.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, too, because I have no illusions about physical appearances. And I just say, I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but it's a kind of a freeing thing. I remember, a few people who were like really good looking people. And there've been studies about people who are like really good looking, how they're treated better in society. But I think there's something freeing as I've aged.
Oh, absolutely.
You say
absolutely.
Like, you're going to develop yourself as a person based on your character, and this is it is freeing in a certain sense. It's not into like the look. You're not getting that from this show. We're 2 old guys who are, we're doing this because we think it's important.
Keeping all the other gals away from him.
So.
Yeah, we got dogs barking outside, but no girls.
It wasn't always that way for us, Dave. But
what?
But it's but it's for everybody, and maybe it will be freeing for everybody. But for me, I just personally, it was kind of freeing. When you start losing hair, you start going gray. you don't run the
Well,
100-yard dash as fast as you used to, and
right.
you know.
But you have to. I'm not putting. I'm just saying we are both very fortunate. We have strong support too in our wives, and
Yeah, yeah,
that makes it a hell of a
absolutely.
lot easier. I you know, I've it's been said, with my drug addiction, with my alcoholism, and even Judy talking me to go to the hospital this time. I probably would have gone on my own, but I'm not sure. Um, she saved my life, and
Yeah, Judy's
that's
a rock for you. I mean, she,
well, she always has been. Yeah.
she's
Uh,
amazing, and Ronnie's that
and
way for me.
and Ronnie's that way for you. That's right.
Right.
All right, my
So,
man. I'm gonna go pee.
all right, Dave, I'm gonna sign off, and I mean, I'm gonna sign off. So, I'll talk to you
We'll talk to
soon, and then
you.
hopefully onward to next week if we can do it.
Sounds good, Bry.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night from Divided We Stand. Don't forget to like and subscribe or become a member or just show up. And those of you who are incognito, it was nice that you showed up. Thank you. Bye-bye.